If freedom was free and the world was at peace, there would be little need for the brave men and women of our armed forces to be placed in harm's way around the globe. But challenges to freedom continue to exist, and so these members are deployed, often at severe risk to their personal being. In a recent letter to the San Jose Mercury News, Stephen Wright, who is a former editor of the Mercury News, wrote about the impact of his son's deployment to Afghanistan. His remarks embodied the message we wanted to convey today. Mr. Wright could not be here today due to a previous commitment. Pinch hitting for him will be Col Walt Haslemann, U.S. Army retired, a long-time, truly dedicated parishioner of St. Francis, who will read Mr. Wright's article. Col Haslemann is the perfect replacement since his son Tommy was deployed to the Middle East several years ago. Col Haslemann?
Thank you, Ray. Yesterday after Mass at the Grange, Ray Powers asked me to read the article titled, "Fear Never Ends for Troops' Loved Ones," written by Stephen E. Wright. Stephen is a former editorial page editor for the Mercury News. He is vice president for communications of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. He wrote the following article, which Ray already introduced, for the Mercury News that appeared in Sunday's edition. You may have read it. But let me first introduce myself. As Ray mentioned, I'm Walt Haslemann. I served in the military, U.S. Army, on active duty from 1962 until 1987. Some of you may know our son Tom, served in Afghanistan, 2 consecutive tours in Iraq as an engineer captain, including the initial attack with the 3rd ID, and 18 more months as a civilian advisor, the chief of infrastructure of the Iraqi army. So Maggie and I have gone through the cycle which Stephen is writing about. I would like to read the article, and I quote, "The email on my screen last week began like this: Apache troops, families. By now, most of you have spoken to your signed key caller about the recent casualties suffered by our squadron. Below, you will find a recent article in the Fayetteville Observer about our 3 fallen paratroopers. The 3 soldiers, aged 24, 22, and 19, were members of the 3rd Squadron, 73rd Cavalry Regiment, 1st Brigade Combat Team, 82nd Airborne Division. My 23-year-old son is a Cav Scout Staff Sergeant with the 3rd of the 73rd, but I have no idea if he was around when the EID killed the young scouts. They are in a remote part of eastern Afghanistan with little access to phones or internet. We've only heard from Dylan twice via short emails since his deployment in mid-March. The last email I received from my son said that he was working hard and getting little sleep. He added that he didn't have any hot water for the dry noodles that I had sent him. That means he's out in the countryside or in the mountains. As a Cav Scout, his job is to go out ahead of the infantry, to be the eyes and ears of the officers making decisions of the next move against the Taliban. To me, it means he's always in danger. 8 soldiers from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne Division, have died since April. When my friend and family learned the details of our son's most recent deployment, he served 2 tours in Iraq. They offer heartfelt gratitude about his service. Then they often look down and say something like, "I can't imagine how hard it is for you and Lori. I don't know what I would do if it was my son." then their voices trail off. I was at work when I received that email. My head dropped into my hands and my eyes filled with tears. I went outside so no one could see. It was difficult for me to focus the rest of the day. While the news was not nearly as bad as being told your son has been killed, it was close. I couldn't help but think that instead of the email, at any moment, the casualty notification officer could be at my front door. One of my worst feelings is helplessness, protecting your child in what parents are supposed to do, and I can't. When I read about soldiers who have been killed in this deployment, the depth of my sorrow for their families and their friends, my son, creates a psyche, something I can only describe as a black hole. Emptiness, similar to when a family member or friend has died. I tear up thinking of the dead warriors from my son's squadron and not their battle buddies who gathered a couple of days later at the combat base memorial that features their boots, rifles, helmets, medals, and photographs. Then I pray. I pray to God that for Dylan's safety, that he is fed and rested, that as a leader of a small platoon, he's alert and he can make the right decisions. I also pray for the departed family members and friends who are with God and surround Dylan with whatever safety aura they might have. Ask my family to pray. Ask friends to pray. I ask the same thing of strangers if they ask how my son is doing, what my son is doing for a living. As a former journalist, I also deal with the danger of doing what I did for most of my working life, reporting and spreading the news. Through conversations, email, Facebook, Twitter, and text, I remind people that there are still some 90,000 troops in Afghanistan. I pass along facts and post pictures of the service members killed in action, along with pictures that the Army posts showing patrols, village sweeps, and faces of Afghan children who stand stark in contrast to the heavily armed uniformed soldiers. I remind people that while much of the political talk about Afghanistan today centers on the upcoming troops withdrawal, there's those of us with loved ones serving there know that they're working hard to crack the back of the Taliban before the troop strength is reduced. Working harder means more deaths and more military members. It means that every time I turn on our street, I say a prayer and look to see if the government sedan is parked in front of our house. Unquote. Again, this is an article in the Mercury News written by Stephen E. Wright, who unfortunately could not be with us today. Thank you.